Hello and welcome to Diodice Tabletop. I have finally received a package that I've been waiting for. The flickering red LEDs have arrived. So in this episode we are going to be fitting the LEDs into the head and into the mouth. So when I was printing these, one of these failed, which is ideal, so I'm going to have a test piece to work on. You can see here, I don't know what happened, I think it was a layer adhesion issue. Some of the teeth cut off, the layers shifted a bit, but the eyes itself are fine, so this is going to enable me to use this as a practice piece to make sure I'm not ruining the only head I have at the moment on the first try. I've got these LED housings that I'm going to be using to fit the LEDs in. This is going to help create a nice round fit in the eyes themselves, make it look all part of the head. So these are 5mm wide and the LEDs themselves are 3mm, so there is going to be some work I'm going to have to do on the head itself. So that's going to be the first part of this video. You can see here I'm going to have to try and blast out what the original eyepiece of the model is and get that to fit in. So the first step is going to be removing all of that plastic around my little hole I made earlier. Onto the test piece. Just like with the rest of the model, I'm going to be using the rotary tool to take out all of this plastic. So the final diamond bit, that's what I'm going to start off with, and it's just a matter of getting to it. And after about 5 minutes, it was time to see how this was shaping up. The first thing that I needed to do was get the sort of body of the LED holder itself to fit in. Then, as you can see, it's got a beveled edge around it. I trimmed that up so it would be able to slot neatly inside. But it was long enough for me to figure out just how much plastic I needed to remove. And I wasn't too far off after the first attempt, but this did need some minor adjustments just to make it fit perfectly. After making those, I grabbed a paintbrush and used the back of it just to be able to push the LED holder inside a little bit firmer, just so I could see how it was all fitting up. And I think that's pretty good. I'm happy with that there, and that's looking pretty straightforward as well. Whilst I was removing all the plastic on the first eye, I thought that there may be a better way to do this, so I went and I grabbed my drill, and I got an ascending series of drill bits, starting off I think it was about 4mm, moving up to 5.5. My thinking here was that I'd just be able to increase the drill bit size each time. It would make the hole larger, so I'm not removing too much plastic and risking cracking it too much, and then the LED holder would be able to slide straight inside. This didn't really end up working like I thought it would, and it is going to be better to use the rotary bit, so that's what we're going to stick with. Now that we've got that all figured out, it is the worrying time of doing it for real. So let's get stuck into the first head and see how we go. That's Lanesh satisfied. Now that I've got a loose idea of how I'm going to get these LEDs to fit, I made this little crude wiring diagram just to visually help me follow along. I know it's not a very complicated circuit at all, but I'm not very good at electronics, so this will really help us moving forward and keeping track of where I am with things. So the first thing that I wanted to do was create a test circuit just to make sure that this was going to work moving forward. You can see I'm going to pull out 2 red LEDs here, but I ended up changing out to, I think it was chartreuse or whatever colour it is. This was just to make sure that I'm not burning through any red LEDs. Which means it's only time for one thing, it's soldering. And if anyone remembers this, you have just absolutely cacked yourself. Yes, I had the magazines. A few of you probably don't, most of you probably don't know what this is. Go and look it up. With soldering remaining to be a weakness of mine, this test was just an insight of what was to come with this project, but I put it all together and they work. Now, one interesting side effect that I didn't anticipate is having one flickering red LED in the circuit will make them all flicker. Okay, let's get started. Taking a look through the rotary bits that I had in the little box that it came with, there was this larger diametered diamond one that I had, which fitted into the eye a lot better. So I swapped this one out for the more fine rotary tool. This saved me quite a bit of time actually, and I still had the same level of control that I had with the smaller piece itself. So keeping the original one, the practice one next to me, I was able to use that just to follow as a guide to how I was going with this one. They seem to have printed slightly differently though, so I did have a bit of trouble with the, I think it's the left-hand eye, right maybe as you're looking at it here. But after a little bit of work, the LED housing managed to fit in there no problem. Disaster ended up striking. I couldn't help but fiddle off camera with a couple more placements and I ended up snapping a bit of plastic. Now the LED housing slips straight through, so I'm going to have to create a new one for this side. It's not going to be too much of an issue. So I just grabbed the snips out of the top drawer and cut a new one down to size. Because of the way that the LEDs go into the holder, they are going to need to be glued into place first. The two prongs end of the LED will stick into the back of the eye, but they'll obviously have a wire coming onto the back of them that I can then feed out the body. So first step here is with a dab of super glue, we just run that around the little rim on the LED, push that into its holder, hold it for a few seconds, and that all sticks together nicely. Next, it was a simple matter of following the same steps on the other one. And of course, before going any further, it's always good to make sure that these work. The LED housing in the roof of the mouth is a lot more of a fiddly matter. It doesn't quite fit in perfectly, so I am going to have to make some adjustments to that hole, which is an absolute bitch to get to. But I've got this round ball attachment for the rotary tool, so I'm going to try and use that at first. Now, the first time that I came at this, you'll see there that the rotary tool kept hitting the teeth. I couldn't get deep enough in for the bit to actually touch the hole and make it bigger. So what I ended up doing, really nice and simple, was just having the rotary bit stick out as far into the housing as possible, and then I was able to get right inside the mouth, make that hole larger, and after doing that, the LED housing fit in nice and snug. With that done, it's finally time to glue the flickering LED into its housing, ready to go inside the mouth. Now we need to wire it. I already stripped these cables off camera, just taking a razor around them and pulling the end of the rubber away from the wire, exposing it. So now it's time to solder these on, red to the positive, black to the negative. The longer leg of the LED is the positive, the shorter is the negative. Before we do that though, we just put one of these heat shrink tubings and push that over it to make sure that I can feed that over later on. Solder the positive onto the positive terminal of the LED. Heat up the shrink wrap with a lighter, and that's going to hold that firmly in place. Time now just to repeat the step on the negative. This time it was a bit easier. I wrapped the wire around the leg of the LED, heated that up and rubbed solder into it. I've since found out that that's a much better way to solder things. It still didn't help me though. This was an absolute nightmare of a process. This footage right here is sped up nearly 6,000 times. I suck at it. I don't know how people do it, if you have a special piece of gear or something that enables you to do it. But after much struggle, I was able to get all three of them wired up and ready to be ran into the head. That was a relief. After doing that, I was a little bit concerned about how strong the legs of the LED would be, because I'm going to have to pull them around a bit. So what I did is I went back to my heat shrink tubing box, got the largest size that I could, which ended up going perfectly around the outside of the LED housing. Cut that into shape, and then with a lighter melted that together. This made now a really strong connection, making sure that the LED legs and all of the wiring inside it was all firmly held in place and connected to the body. This is also going to help give me a little bit of extra resistance when I come to push these into the eyes of the head, just to make sure that it's not falling and flopping around everywhere, and I've got a little bit of an easier surface to glue onto. Whilst I was playing about with fitting these off camera to see how they'd go, I ended up getting this bang on in place first time. Unfortunately, I wasn't recording it with the top down camera, but I didn't want to risk taking it out to try and refilm it, so I just glued it in place as it was. And this is starting to look great. Back to the top down view now, and as you can see there, that is all fitting in nicely. Making sure not to make the same mistake that I had just done, I didn't fiddle about with this one off camera, and I decided to do it all whilst filming. I fed the wires into the eye and pulled them with a pair of tweezers out of the back. Then it was a matter of just pushing this in place with a lot of prodding, a couple of different tools to line it all up how I liked it. Once it was all in place and I was happy with its fitment, especially getting it lined up with the other eye as well so they were even, I then ran a line of super glue all around the outside of it just to help hold it in place. This was pretty firm. I don't think it was going to go anywhere, but it's always better just to make sure these things stay in place. So holding it whilst it dries, and that was all done. There we are, 2 eyes are in place, and this is starting to look like a menacing beast. On to the last LED, and that is the flickering one that's going to fit in its mouth. As you can see there, I had to curve the legs of the LED and a bit of the solder just so that I was able to feed it into the mouth, pull the cable out of the back and sort of twist it from a 45-degree angle up in place. Once I'd done that, I put some glue on it, held it firmly, and there we are, that's successful. And look at all these wires coming out. The Omnissiah would be pleased. Next on the agenda to do is to now connect up the LEDs inside the head. Because this is a series circuit, there is one positive line that will run into the first LED, the negative of that will run to the positive of the second, the negative of that second will run to the positive of the third, and then the negative of that third will be my whole negative line that will come back to the battery pack. Which meant more soldering, which I'm obviously terrible at. This time I didn't really have to worry about making it too neat. I was able just to twist these together, solder them, grab some shrink wrap tubing, and light that to melt it. Repeated the same then, with the positive and the negative of the second to the third LED. And there we have it, there was complete and time to test. It was a bit tricky at first to hold all this in place, but I am super happy with this. Look at how this has turned out. I originally didn't want the eyes to be flickering in sync with the mouth. I wanted them all to be separate. I didn't know that connecting the flickering light with the other two would mean that all 3 of them flickered. However, I much, much prefer the way that this has come out. And there we have it. The eyes and the mouth are all wired in together. Just quickly tuck these inside to keep it all neat. You can then see you've got the positive line and the negative. They'll connect to what you saw in the last video of the wires that ran up through the body. So I think the next time is completing the torso. We also have a couple of connectors that we need to put in place. I've also got a couple of orders of some 3D bits that are on the way that are going to help moving on to the next stage of the build. So thank you all ever so much for watching this video. I really hope you're enjoying the series so far. Please like, comment, subscribe. I've had a few great comments from you guys at the moment. Keep them up. I'm really enjoying engaging with you. So thank you ever so much. And until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.